Hello all, Rick here, looking into the lore and strangeness that is the unknown Borg Renegade's vessel from Star Trek The Next Generation's two-parter The Descent. It was a unique design that broke the typical Borg image reflective of its crew, although it did turn up once again in Voyager. Not the same ship of course, the one we saw was consumed by the solar fury of fiery plasma from an artificially induced mass ejection. The Type 3, or Renegade's ship, was designed by Dan Curry and built by Greg Jean. I always felt that the fractured nature of these Borg was reflected in the design of the vessel. Gone was the uniformity and strictly mathematical layout of the cube. This ship was geometric, but twisted and asymmetrical. It was wider than it was tall, and had a definite front, back and side. While still as fearsome as a cube, and overwhelmingly stronger than the Enterprise, the ship had lost so much of its implacable eeriness. The class was designated by Starfleet as the Type 3, after the Borg cube and the Unseen scout vessel already being catalogued. The Sphere actually was first seen in the Battle of Sector 001, although it's possible Picard retained some knowledge of the design. Within the Borg's network, however, this class was referred to as an assimilator class, which shares the designation with another ship which was designated to primarily assimilate, although that one is non-canonical. The function of the Type 3 is a little harder to pin down, especially considering the atypical way it was introduced. Some mystery surrounds the origins of the class, as it's unclear if the ship was constructed by the Renegade Borg, or is an amalgamation of captured vessels, converted into its new form. One origin was that it was created by the Renegade Borg, disconnected from the hive mind by the reassimilation of Hugh, and is entirely unique to them as a converted vessel, much like the Earth transport ship as seen in Star Trek Enterprise. This is supported by the notion that the cube, to which Hugh returned, was thrown into chaos by his mind. This is not a cube, and therefore is likely to be a new acquisition after this incident. While the first encounter with the Type 03 was in 2368, in 2373 a schematic of this same vessel was witnessed in the Delta Quadrant while the ship itself was not. This was in the context of deployable mines, which suggests that the Type 3 was in fact some form of workhorse or mine-laying vessel reserved for support or labour functions within the collective. Whatever its role, it's seen as evidence that the design is in fact one that is retained and reused by the collective. This has been incorporated into its lore now, with the designation given as a multi-kinetic mine-deploying ship that the Renegade Borg used to escape the collective. I always felt it looked like a ground structure that was made space-worthy, but there is no evidence or lore to support that. This ship was estimated to be 1,374.7 metres long, which would make it 1,833 wide and 775.4 tall. However, I've got to say, it looks way larger on screen. Unlike a cube, which is uniform and decentralised, the T3 has more designated zones and identifiable structures, beginning with the left-hand node. This wedge is the transwarp unit, containing both the generator, field projector, and control points. The central platform houses no bridge unit, but the top is an intricate sensor array. The main body houses the general drone population, while throughout the hull are materials and processing systems. This shows us that the ship was capable of utilising a wide array of substances through assimilation towards use for the Borg. The right-hand arm ends in an auxiliary control node. For propulsion, the ship was capable of warp and accessing the Borg transwarp network, despite being severed from the collective. The use of a transwarp corridor was around 20 times as fast as the USS Enterprise's maximum warp speeds. This originated from a detectable subspace core, the stand-in for a warp core on a Borg ship, which was highly shielded and protected deep within the vessel. It also featured an identifiable impulse engine, as seen on the emissions strip at the rear of the arm. This impulse was also very powerful. However, it was about on par with the Galaxy class, as it was unable to gain on it at sublight speeds. Having a visible impulse outlet is also unique for a Borg ship. When following the Enterprise into the corona of a star, the ship was able to idle and retain its position in temperatures well over 12,000 degrees Celsius and 10,000 rads. This was pushing the upper limits of the Galaxy class, and only metaphasic shields allowed the Enterprise to continue, something which the Borg did not have. So while it was eventually destroyed by a solar flare, it should be pointed out that under normal conditions, the ship was hardier than one of the Federation's most advanced starships. In terms of armaments, the Type 03 was a Borg ship, and therefore had the capability to form every weapon type or effect that the Collective knew. However, by default, it was prepared with plasma-based weaponry, from beams and torpedoes across numerous points over the hull. Like with the Borg cube, many of these firing points are irregular and simply brought into position when needed. On top of this, it had the standard Borg assimilating tractor beam, which was a favoured tactic of larger Borg ships to hold its target in place and begin to dissect them. The Borg's favoured tractor beam also drained shield power and energy systems aboard the target, leading to an easier capture. This was amplified with the use of a tachyon beam array that can also disrupt shielding. One possibly unique feature, however, was the disruptive topological matrix. This was a cyber warfare system that essentially sought to breach an enemy ship's firewalls and overwhelm their systems with numerous commands and errors. For the Borg, this was a far more deadly device than you might expect, considering many other species' ships run entirely different computer operating systems that are not always compatible. Therefore, there was never a guarantee that a disruption attempt would be successful, let alone be able to contend with the target's security measures. With the Collective, however, their entire deal was taking disparate tech and making it all work together, so infiltration into another's systems was entirely more plausible. The most common result of the disruptive matrix was that the afflicted ship would become overwhelmed with EPS conduit ruptures and overloads, with numerous fires breaking out. Now, in the alternate timeline of Star Trek Online, one where director Hugh survives to the year 2412, the Borg cooperative he leads is headed by a Type 3 vessel named the Yasutake. While similar to the standard Type 3 in almost every external way, its assimilation facilities have been converted for de-assimilation, and extensive reformatting of internal layouts has been done to form more private quarters, communal areas, workspaces, and even Hugh has his own office and dedicated lab. This is all in an effort to allow the individual XB's normalcy, and it's interesting to consider a Borg ship being so undone in this way. No more cavernous chambers of uniform regeneration alcoves. With individuality comes the need for relaxation and distraction. Without the cohesion of the hive mind, tasks are better performed in a division-based location instead of being spread throughout an entire ship. And with liberation comes the need for actual sleep in some cases, the need for socialization, and the desire for privacy. One major alteration to the Yasutake, however, was the retooling of the disruptive matrix into the conversion viral beam array. When fired into a Borg ship, the viral beam array sought to do the same infiltration as the disruptive one, but instead it introduced a program to break down the connections between the Collective and the drones, in an attempt to return identity to them and hopefully weaken the Borg further. While in Apocrypha and on screen, the Type 3 is often seen in the hands of liberated or renegade Borg, those with individuality. There are also examples of them operating in the Collective's clutches as dedicated assimilation ships made to engage in ship-to-ship combat and convert opponents quickly. The fact that such a vessel then finds itself home to some of the first freed drones is an ironic fate, but its more segmented layout actually serves as an easier transition into working with individuality than the infamous cubes, which demand cohesion and a single connected mind to run. Honestly, when starting this video I was unsure if I had enough information to make one longer than 4 minutes, but the tales around this ship's very existence and its differences from regular cubes actually provides a greater look into the ship's story. So, thanks for watching this breakdown of the Type 3, or the Assimilator, or the Renegade's ship from Star Trek TNG. Recurring design or one-off. It was definitely an imposing vessel, and I always wondered, what would come out on top, this or a cube? Until the next video, thanks again, and goodbye.